Hi everybody, happy 4th. We're going to wind down the week with some polling. This time we've got governor in California and New York. We'll also take a look at that Thomas Massie primary in Kentucky. But we're going to start with another governor's race. This is New Jersey. Their election is coming up in November, and we've got two of them. First, we've got one from Rutgers-Eagleton. The headline is, Sherrill leads Ciattarelli by 20 points. That's a massive margin. Let's get down into it. The numbers with leaners are 51 for Sherrill, just 31 for Ciattarelli, 13 undecided. If you push the leaners, then it's 56 for Sherrill. Ciattarelli, 21 points less at 35. That's a massive gap. That would be a total blowout election if it got close to that. Now, the second poll is going to look a little bit different. But for this first one, is anybody expecting it to be a 20-point race? I'd say not too many. Now, they go on to note here that polling failed in 2021 when Phil Murphy defeated Ciattarelli by a narrow 3-point margin. Now, for a little bit of comparison, back in that race, Rutgers-Eagleton, in their poll from late May, they also showed Phil Murphy in the 50s. Ciattarelli was way down in the 20s. So you could believe whatever you want. Maybe Rutgers-Eagleton is onto something here, and Sherrill's going to win this thing by 20 points. You can make somewhat of a case for it. It's a blue state. Trump is in the White House. There could be some backlash to that administration. But it's far easier to make a case that this thing is at least going to be under 10 points, and that's as of right now. Plenty of time to go as people are just enjoying their summer. They're not really thinking about the November election right now. And Ciattarelli's top strategist panned the poll as erroneous. They say in 2021, the Monmouth poll screwed up so bad that they got shut down. Eagleton is worse at next. Then they go on to attack the sampling, capped off with a bit of an explicit exclamation. Then it goes on to talk about their unweighted data, and they point out the presidential result was only about 6 points for Harris. Now, I think if you're totally against Ciattarelli, you'd still have to think this poll is a little bit overly ambitious for Sherrill. And I usually try to give pollsters the benefit of the doubt. They know if they totally blow it, that their reputation is definitely going to suffer. So it's in their interest to get it right. I know some people talk about suppression polls. I think that is way more uncommon than people think. And how much does it really even matter? Look at the last race. The polling showed Murphy with a comfortable lead, and it was pretty close. And with the favorables, they have Sherrill at 50-21. Ciattarelli is underwater 33-42. With independents, Sherrill leads 45-28. She leads with both women and men. And with non-white voters, she's up 70-10. Ciattarelli is ahead with white voters 44-39. Then they go into some of the more specific issues. But most of it still looks pretty good for Sherrill. Now, this poll was taken June 13th through the 16th with 621 adult voters, and the margin of error is 5.4. This poll is way outside the margin of error. Looks great for Sherrill. Of course, I expect her to have an advantage, given this is New Jersey. But 20 plus points is far and above what I think is reasonable. Now, if you want to compare that with another poll from the same state, we've got another one right here. Now, the headline here is Ciattarelli can win New Jersey governor's race by opposing transgenderism. Now, this poll focuses more on cultural issues, and it was sponsored by the Conservative American Principles Project, so it's likely to have a red lean to it. But this says that 68% of Garden State voters oppose allowing biological boys who identify as transgender to compete against girls in sports, while just 22% support it. And 70% of New Jersey residents oppose taxpayer funding for gender transition or sex reassignment surgery for minors. And keeping with the same theme here, 60% of voters oppose public elementary schools teaching about sexual orientation and transgender ideology. This is according to 500 likely voters by Signal. So on those specific cultural issues, love them or hate them, they do tend to favor Ciattarelli. Of course, there's a bunch of other ones that are going to benefit Sherrill that this poll does not go into. But I would guess if Sherrill came out in support of those popular positions that her party generally opposes, she would have to do a lot better, and Ciattarelli probably has no chance. Now, in the head-to-head matchup, they have Sherrill ahead by 7, 50-43, 7 undecided. So Ciattarelli has an opening here on some of these cultural issues, as this poll heavily notes. So that could be something, especially in a close race. But Ciattarelli's going to have more than just this. He got close last time, so he's no stranger to running for governor. And then down here, they do an informed ballot, where after voters are told about these candidates' stances on some of these cultural issues, then Sherrill is ahead by just 1, 46-45. The informed ballot is usually going to be heavily biased, and I don't think it's reliable data. But down here, it says the poll finds that 53% of voters say that the state is on the wrong track. So those are two very different polls for New Jersey, but even the one that favors Chitterelli still shows him down by 7. But hey, as I said, it's summer, people might not really start paying attention for another couple of months. So we'll be following this race. Next, we've got a poll in California. This is from UC Irvine. If you do want to take a look at the methodology, all these links will be down below in the description. But let's get down into this and take a look at the right track, wrong track. For the state of California, being on the right track, it's just at 30%. Even Democrats are only at 46, Republicans 18, Independents 22. Wrong track is at 60. Another 46% of Democrats agree, along with 79% of Republicans and 64% of independents. Then you've got the racial breakdown and the age breakdown. But we're not going to go over everything. Let's get down to the Donald Trump approval rating. Overall, he's at just 33%, 63% disapprove. His best is with high school or less, but it's still only at 42%. His worst is going to be at college plus, just 25% approve, 71 disapprove. Then down here, they have the breakdown with different age groups. On this, his best group is going to be with millennials, age 29 to 44. And his worst is going to be Gen Z, under age 29. So it's a pretty blue state, not a big shock here that Trump is underwater. What about Governor Gavin Newsom? It's just 9% strongly approve of Newsom, 29 is somewhat approve, 23 somewhat disapprove, and 32% strongly disapprove. With Democrats, he's got very soft support, 17% strongly approve, 48% somewhat approve, 24 somewhat disapprove, and 6 strongly disapprove. And of course, Republicans hate this guy, 70% strongly disapprove. Just 5% strongly approve. With independents, it's a little bit more mixed, but 35%, that's the most, they strongly disapprove. And also only 6% strongly approve. So pretty weak numbers there for Newsom as well. If he ran for re-election, these numbers do make him look vulnerable. Here's the gender and the racial breakdown. He's tied with both men and women at 38% approve. His highest racial group is going to be black voters at 52, and his lowest is going to be Hispanic at 34. Then down here, overall, it's 38 approve, 56 disapprove. With the different age groups, just like Trump, he's doing his worst with Gen Z, 33 approve, 53 disapprove. Now that's his lowest approval rating, but the gap is higher with millennials at 34 and 60. Now the oldest voters, age 80 plus, are split, 50 approve, 50 disapprove. So that's one potential bright spot there for Newsom. The absolute oldest voters look like they might be kind of okay with the status quo, but pretty much everybody else, not a fan of Newsom and not a fan of Trump. And finally, we could take a look at the educational breakdown. So Newsom near the top of the list for potential 2028 presidential Democrats. However, these are weak numbers considering this is a blue state. But keeping it just on California, they actually have some 2026 governors polling. There's so many question marks about who's actually going to run and who's not going to run. And that means there's a lot of unknowns. But the highlight here is, if it was Kamala Harris against a generic Republican, Harris leads by 12, but she's only at 41, the Republican candidate at 29. 14% say they would not even vote. Another 16 don't know. So that race is pretty much wide open. Now, if they include the full list of candidates, keep in mind this would be a top 2 primary with the top 2 vote getters going on to the general election. So Harris is the clear leader right now with 24%. Obviously, her name ID is going to be sky high. But the thing is, she's dwarfed by this 40% here that say they're not sure. Second place is Rick Caruso, who lost for the LA mayor's race. He's at 9%, and then it's pretty much down from there. I think this could look a lot different in 6 months from now. When you're this far out, name ID tends to have a lot of weight to it. Now, if we go down and look at just Democrats, then Harris leads at 49%. Way down from there, not sure yet, is at 25. Katie Porter pulling in 11%. Just with Republicans, even they have 38% saying they're not sure. But Rick Caruso, the Democrat, does lead with 27%. And look at independents, a big 52% say they're not sure. Then underneath that, they've got some additional breakdowns with race and education, etc. But I think we've got a good idea of where things stand right now. Again, Trump and Newsom, not popular. The governor's race is massively wide open, but Harris has the early advantage with her name ID. But we're going to see what happens in this key race, in this important important state next year. Let's move on to another massive race. We've got New York governor. Just like California, a lot of question marks about who's definitely going to run and who's going to sit it out. But we do know Governor Kathy Hochul is running for re-election. She's being challenged by her own Lieutenant Governor Antonio Delgado. But let's take a look at this Siena College poll. Now first, in the Democratic primary, Kathy Hochul leads Antonio Delgado 49% to 12. Richie Torres would pull in 10. So Hochul has her own vulnerabilities, but as far as a primary challenge goes, it still looks like she's in the driver's seat. On the Republican side, Elise Stefanik is in the lead with 35%, Mike Lawler is at 18, and Bruce Blakeman pulls in 7. Not much has changed from the previous poll. There's a lot more data here, but let's focus on the head-to-head matchup in the general election. It's a nice table right here. If it's Kathy Hochul against Mike Lawler, she leads by a huge 20 points, but it's 44% for Hochul, 24 for Lawler. If Hochul faces Bruce Blakeman, she leads 44 to 19. And if she faces Elise Stefanik, she's at 47, Stefanik 24. With independents, Hochul is in the low 30s in all three. Stefanik does the best with that group at 26. Now the easy takeaway from these results are there's just way too many undecided voters. There's only around 70% of voters that actually have decided who they're going to vote for here. I don't think there's really a lot of benefit to taking a look at a poll like this. Republicans did make it closer than usual in 2022, but they still kept it over a 5-point margin. But they still could not get it under a 5-point margin. Now how about Hochul's favorables? She's at 42%. 47% unfavorable. It's down slightly from last month. Now her job approval rating is a little bit better. It's at 50%, 45 disapprove. So she's got a bit of a gap there between herself and her job approval. And another ominous sign here for Hochul is 37% are prepared to re-elect her. Now that seems low, but also doesn't really mean much. Democrats might not be enthused for her, but if it came down to her and a Republican, most would come around to her and the lean of the state could easily put her over the top. After that, they've got some data on some local issues in the state, but as far as the governor's race goes, we still have no answers. Just like California, it's just way too early. A lot of incumbents look weak because there is a lot of dissatisfaction with political leaders across the country. But the question is, will that lead to anything changing come the next election? Now let's finish it up here with a quick one in Kentucky. This is just with Republican primary voters in the 4th Congressional District. That's the one held by Thomas Massie. And he's been an occasional thorn in Trump's side by not supporting some of his legislation. So because of that, Massie now has a Republican primary challenger. It says here, only 19% say they plan to vote to re-elect Massie regardless of who challenges them. And that number drops to just 14% if Trump endorses a primary opponent. So there is one challenger in the race right now. That's Nicole Lee Evington, and she's leading Massie 31 to 19. Massive amount of voters undecided. Here's Massie's favorables. 23% favorable, 62 unfavorable. Those don't sound like numbers for a Republican in this deep red district. Meanwhile, Trump is at 89% favorable with the same voters. So this is just with a small 368 likely Republican primary voters. So is Massie in trouble here in Kentucky? It does look like it. He seems like a pretty conservative guy who's trying to stick to his principles, and occasionally that just doesn't line up with some of the specifics of the Trump agenda. Usually if a Republican goes against Trump, they're going to have some issues in their next primary election. So this could be it for Massie. Maybe he decides not to even run again. Or maybe he goes back to his district and he has a strong connection with his local voters and he's able to turn things around. It's kind of a smaller local race, but that's it for the polling this week. So let me know in the comments. What do you think about any of the polls in this video? What stands out to you the most? Did you get any beneficial information out of any of this data, or is it just way too early? Let me know what you think down below. On your way out, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Join if you'd like to support the channel. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.